Joining me now is Harvard Law Professor Emeritus and Newsmax contributor Alan Dershowitz. Professor Dershowitz, thank you for coming back on tonight. And
thank you.
The title of your new book coming out, which you can pre-order on Amazon right now, is called Guilt by Association, which is appropriate, I guess, because you were, maligned, I guess, for also criticizing Vindman, because you were on that panel last night on Fox News. I'm sorry, guilt by accusation. I always say guilt by association just by I guess, practice here. But, this is interesting here. There was a lot of criticism of this witness today, Professor Dershowitz. Do you think that actually helps the White House's case?
Well, first, let me be clear. I had never heard of Colonel Vindman. I think when this came up yesterday, and I had no idea what either Professor Yu or Laura Ingraham were really talking about, so I decided to remain silent. My silence should not have been interpreted as acceptance of any claim that he might be guilty of espionage, which I think is dead wrong. I've always opposed criminalization of political differences. I wrote a book about it, and I would be strongly opposed to accusing an American patriot of espionage. And I just want to publicly apologize to Colonel Vindman for my silence. If I had known who he was and if I had known anything about him, I would have surely interrupted and spoken up. From what I know, he's a great patriot. He got a Purple Heart. I represented a lot of people who came out of the Ukraine, dissidents and fuseniks and others, and they've become some of the greatest American citizens possible. So I don't want my silence yesterday to be misunderstood as in any way agreeing with any criticism of Colonel Vindman. I want to just commend him for his service to the United States and praise him for being a great patriot, and criticize anybody who looks to his birthplace in the Ukraine as in any way suggesting lack of patriotism. My grandparents were born in that part of the world too, and they were great patriots. So I just want to be very clear that I apologize profusely to the Colonel for my silence. If I had known who he was and what the situation was, I would have spoken up quite aggressively.
Yeah, there seems to be some, I guess, regret about the way that, his character has been impugned. He seems like his character is beyond reproach here. But he is the first witness, I guess, firsthand witness to that phone call that we've heard from. I'm sure you've read his opening statement today. We hear this is cherry-picked, the information that is released from that. But what is your take on it? How damaging do you think it is for the White House's defense of these charges?
But I don't think it's at all relevant on the issue of impeachment. Even if you take the absolute worst-case scenario, a quid pro quo, that's not a federal crime. It's not a crime at all, and it's not an impeachable offense. It might very well be a political sin, but we have to, under the Constitution, distinguish between political sins, federal crimes, and impeachable offenses. And this doesn't reach the level of an impeachable offense, even if everything the Colonel said is absolutely accurate. And there is a transcript, so it can be compared. I wish there were a tape recording. It would have been the best evidence possible instead of people's recollections or people's recollections recorded in a transcript.
We had about 90 seconds left. One more question to ask you real quick. Former federal prosecutor and GOP Congressman Bob Barr, who was a key member of the House team that led the impeachment proceedings against President Clinton in 1998, told Newsmax today that Democrats' impeachment case is fatally flawed. After reviewing the original whistleblower complaint, Barr concludes that it was written with the sole purpose in mind of undermining the legitimacy of President Trump, and he says any judge would toss it out of a criminal court. Do you agree?
Well, I had my run-ins with Congressman Barr when he was leading the efforts to try to impeach Bill Clinton, and he was on very much the other side of that issue then. I've principally been opposed both to the impeachment of President Clinton and the impeachment of President Trump. I would have been opposed if I was old enough to the impeachment of Andrew Johnson back in 1860-something. The only impeachment I would make the case against President Clinton was valid under the Constitution.
And nor did the Senate think the case against Andrew Johnson was valid either, because that was thrown out
close
as well.
Very close vote, though.
Yes, it was very
vote.
close indeed. But no president has ever been convicted in an impeachment proceeding yet in this country.
Right.
We'll see what comes of it. Professor Dershowitz, thanks so much for your time. Great to see you as always.
Thank you.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing news channel, now in 65 million homes. Get Newsmax TV on all the major cable systems, or go to newsmaxtv.com and click on the Find Newsmax tab to locate us. Remember, Newsmax TV, where real news for real people.